Okay.
I'm expecting a smaller group today because it's finals. And
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay.
the mad dash.
Live for our last tech talk of the season. And
Of the year.
of the year, of the term. Yeah. Everybody celebrate. And the last one of our 3-part series on discussions, which had been requested for a while, and we have been banging our heads against that topic for a while now, but I think we finally found a good way to approach it in this series. So we're wrapping it up with some specific, actionable examples of discussion designs that kind of put into practice some of the concepts that we discussed last week.
Hmm.
So I think we should just get into it.
Let's do it.
Yeah, without further ado.
Share the screen here.
Thank you, Melanie.
I think I am. There we go.
Okay. This mouse really nuts.
Is it gonna work?
Okay,
Perfect.
so they wanted me to do mine first, so I'll do mine first. This is an example discussion activity that I actually do in my graduate class. So caveat, I've done it with grad students, which is often a different population. This is probably a little bit more complicated and in depth than you might usually do in a freshman or a sophomore course. But I think there's some concepts there that are worth looking at. So,
There's the disclaimer.
but I think it still has some value here. So the content in all of these, the content are kind of specific to the thing that we know and we have background in. That doesn't matter so much because
Absolutely.
we're using them as specific examples, and then you can think about how they might be applicable to your content area. But in this case, it's a media literacy activity. In other words, students are analyzing pieces of media, trying to figure out where do they come from, who made them, why do they make them, what's the purpose, what's the media literacy questions that we would have spent time in the course talking about. I would have given them videos, I would have given them articles, readings, and then this discussion would be the culmination of that. So this is how I have this activity organized. There is a prompt and then there is a reply. There's 2 pieces to it. It's just one weekly discussion, fairly standard format, right? But the initial prompt is find a piece of media that you find interesting, funny, or provocative. Could be a news or opinion article, commercial, music video, movie trailer, TikTok, anything you want. And then embed that piece of media in your post or share a link to it in your post. The technology part of that, some students have no problem with that. Some of them struggle, but it's nice when they can like embed a video or put the picture right in there. But if they just give me a link that takes you somewhere else, that's fine.
Yeah, it meets the same
Yeah,
objective.
I don't care that much about it. I'm not going to get too bent out of shape about it.
Mhm.
And then briefly explain how you found this piece of media and why you chose to share it. That's your whole post. Find a piece of media, share it, tell me why you shared it. That's it. And then I say the initial post should be completed by end of day Wednesday. This is kind of an arbitrary example. Could be Thursday, could be Friday, whatever makes sense for your schedule. But I do want to specifically say, do your initial post by X day and then do replies by Y day, because that is going to increase the level of interaction. You don't have everybody waiting till the very last minute and then everybody's scrambling to reply to each other at the last minute. And that's not a good experience, right? Right now in Canvas, you can't enforce this in any way. We're hoping that in the first quarter of 2024, they will be rolling out in the new discussion redesign. It'll have, they call them checkpoints. Is that the term they use?
Exactly.
Where you will be able to set 2 different checkpoint dates in an assignment or in a discussion, and that will show up in the to-do list and it'll show up in the calendar, and they'll see I'm supposed to make my initial post by this date, and then I'm supposed to reply by this other date. In the absence of that, you can just say that. And then also I use a grading rubric, and my grading rubric includes a criteria for that. Did you make your initial post by the posted date? Did you make your replies by the posted date? And then it's a really easy way for me to kind of build that into the grading criteria and into the workflow.
And since SpeedGrader shows you their initial post and any replies,
it's
right,
very easy
you
for me
can
to
see the
tell,
date.
yep,
Gotcha.
did they do it before this date? Great, they get full credit. Did they miss that date? Well, then maybe there's a grade penalty for that.
So can I ask you a question?
Yes, absolutely.
So in the due date section, do you put the 13th or the 17th, or do you say do the 13th available until the 17th, or some version, I guess? Yeah, how do you construct that?
I wish it were better, but right now the due date I have is the date for the final replies.
Okay.
I don't love that.
Yeah.
I wish I could just have the 2 dates, and I'm hopeful that in the next quarter we'll be able to do that, and we'll show you how to do that.
Well, I'm wondering if you could give them partial credit, and then if they get to the reply, that fills out the credit for the assignment. So on the 13th, you give them partial, then on the 17th, you get them full if they, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
There's
not really the topic we're talking about.
there's
but
different ways you can handle that. I'm not super happy with the way I do that, but the goal is you need to incentivize initial post by a certain time, replies come later. And I do
Gotcha.
see a question in the chat or a comment. Craig adds multiple due dates to the title of the discussion so students know. That's a good idea.
Perfect.
Putting in a title is
Yeah,
smart.
more transparency,
Yeah.
right? And I think that might be one of the keys there.
I like that. That's good.
Discussion boards fall a little bit short when it comes to that. So
Yeah.
you just need that extra level of transparency
Yeah.
if that's your model.
Yep.
Gotcha.
Okay. So anyway, that's the initial post is find a piece of media, post it. Then the replies are actually where the assignment gets a little bit more complicated. Usually it's the reverse, right? And that's one of the problems with many discussions is the initial post is the meat of the assignment, and then the replies feel like a tacked on bit of busy work.
Gotcha.
And that's what frustrates students. It's what frustrates instructors, honestly. The replies, there's no substance to them. They feel like just nonsense. In this case, I flip that around. So after everybody has made their initial post, then complete the following reply prompts. The first one is find another student's media post that has not been replied to yet. And then I say claim their post by making just a quick reaction reply. So you do that right away. As soon as that Wednesday date is passed, hopefully everybody's going to go in there, they're going to look at each other's posts, and you're just going to quickly, oh, Nick, I like that video you post. I claim it. I'm doing that as soon as possible because the sooner that you do that, the more choice of other people's posts you have. If you wait until later, everything's going to be claimed, and then you're stuck with whatever's left, right? So do that right away. And then after you've made the claim, then you do the meat of the activity. Review the 5 core concepts of media literacy and the 5 key questions for consumers of media. This is a whole framework of media literacy that is out there, that is popular and is often used. And then I have a citation, I have a link to it. That's content that students would have read earlier in the week or maybe the week before.
Gotcha.
And then,
so obvious application.
Yes. And then after you've claimed it and after you thought about this, then replying to your claimed media example, do your best to answer each of the 5 key questions. So that's the media literacy stuff. Who created the message? What creative techniques were used to attract my attention? How might different people understand this message differently? What values, lifestyles, and points of view are represented or omitted from this message? Why was this message being sent? That's just some standard critical thinking media literacy questions. Involves some research, involves some critical reflection, and then that's what you would reply with. Well, and that's it. That's the whole assignment.
Well, I really want to like compliment you because your first piece, that's kind of a lower order Bloom's task, right?
It's very easy for students to just find something that you found interesting.
Well, and so there's a low barrier to entry.
Yeah.
And then that meat, like you said, is kind of at the end of it, and that's where you get into those higher level Bloom's objectives.
Yeah. Now it's analysis, synthesis.
Scaffold it.
Yeah.
You scaffold within the assignment as well as throughout the course to like build them to this point. But I just love that structure where you're ramping up to like the meat of it. And so that first piece, you're also putting a little bit, I guess, how would you say it? You're giving the students kind of less to chew on so they can quickly get it done.
Yeah,
so that later responses aren't waiting on somebody to type out paragraphs of text or big responses or have to think really analytically about something to even just get into the game.
Well, and as they're posting theirs, it's very likely they're considering those 5 questions for their own, which is a nice primer for when they actually come back in and respond to somebody else.
Yeah.
So yeah,
but
kind of warming them
you
up.
know, when I first started doing this assignment a few years ago, I didn't have them review each other's work. I just had them post a piece of media and answer the questions for yourself. And the results were not as good because yes, then they're just choosing examples where they already know the answer. Now they don't have to do a bunch of research and analysis, but by flipping it around and having you do that to each other's piece, that adds that extra layer of critical thinking to it.
I really like that.
And by using the other piece, I mean, that kind of limits the convergency of answers, right?
Yes.
Every answer is going to be slightly different.
Yep.
But then Nick answers Caleb's, looks at his, and answers the 5 questions.
Mhm.
Melanie can look at it and go, oh, that's kind of
Yeah.
a model for me, or an exemplar.
Yeah.
Everything becomes an exemplar without making it that Melanie is cheating off another
Yes.
student inadvertently. So that's another really cool reason why I would go with this route.
And this is a format that I have used for a few years now, and it's fun. It's fun for me as the instructor to see what pieces of media the students choose, because it's not a convergent question, it's a divergent question. Everyone is going out and finding their own example, their own thing, usually based on their interests. So like the gearhead guys are going to share a car video, and a teacher is going to share a cute video of students, and it's all over the place. And I love that. It's actually fun, and I look forward to seeing what they come up with. And that's, I think, one of the most important things about designing assignments is designing assignments that you're actually interested in seeing the student work.
So,
okay, so that's mine.
Yeah.
And I think this
That's
is
great.
really nicely generalizable to lots of different domains, right? That first piece is the stimulus, and then kind of adding the meat to reply.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay, who wants to go next?
I guess I'll go next. I think mine's the next in line. So I did mine on essentially goal setting within like a health and fitness course. It's kind of like my little area. So I'm adding my big thing was like, I really like authenticity, and it makes a lot of sense for me to design that way. So I'm giving them a strong purpose, why we're doing this, what's the real world application. And then when I get to the task, that's where I was trying to limit again that convergency piece at the get-go. So this is kind of like a 2-parter discussion. So again, you kind of had your way of systematizing the due dates, post, reply, what dates. This one is 2 separate discussions that link together. So what we have initially is I'm asking students to basically provide their thoughts and feelings towards the topic of the week. So I'm collecting responses that are going to then be used by students later in the week to actually apply their learning. Okay. So here I'm asking them, do they have any health goals or doing anything to improve their health, just in case they might already have a goal, or they're just doing something. So it's trying to build kind of like a case study for each student for a health goal, a fitness goal, and then there's a little disclaimer just in case they aren't comfortable sharing their personal goals. Make one up. That's completely fine. We just need a repository or a library, I should say, of these little cases, these little vignettes that we need to use later on.
And again, that initial stimulus is not a heavy lift, right?
No,
it's not hard to
I
talk
guess I
about
inadvertently did that as well.
It's not hard to talk about your own experience, your own goals. Everybody has those, right?
Absolutely. And they're reflecting on their self and their own personal experience, which always is a great way to kind of start the week, right? We start to think about what we actually know about the topic, and can make it a lot easier to scaffold things through the week.
And then your criteria is also super simple. It's a complete and incomplete.
Yep, absolutely. Low, what do you call it? Low barriers to entry, right? Not gonna be worried about a grade. I just need responses. That's what I'm collecting here. And this is also a great opportunity where an instructor could see the response.
Sure.
There's no reason I can't add something into the mix just to also build out those scenarios more and kind of include that. I've also included examples here just in case, but that's kind of the idea there. So then later in the week, I think one of the keys here as well is scaffolding, right? These discussions aren't happening in a vacuum. They're some way of applying what we've been learning, which I really like that as well. So now what I'm going to have them do is I'm going to have them read back through their week 1 discussion posts, and I'm going to actually have them create something called a SMART goal. You've probably heard of that before in just general goal setting, but it's like a main topic when you're talking about health and fitness. So that kind of SMART goal setting is going to be important. So I'm going to have them create one based off of one of their peers' health vignettes and one of my peers' fitness vignettes. And this is where I wanted them to kind of use the app function to notify other students that they're referencing their work, especially since, they might be personal vignettes, or even, if Caleb doesn't want to talk about his goal, he puts something a little bit zany and peculiar. He probably wants to know that somebody's using that. That's kind of fun. But again, now I'm kind of creating an opportunity for presence. Like somebody is reading your posts and they are referencing it. And I did something similar where I want to make sure that they're doing that also so they can find and ensure that, oh, somebody already snagged Caleb's health goal. I'm not going to snag Caleb's help goal.
Yeah.
And you know, if there's crossover, it's not the end of the world. But my goal again is to create that divergence. I want to make sure that all the responses are unique and they can actually be an opportunity for everybody. And then the final element is, I thought it would be kind of interesting to have them start thinking about what's going to be occurring next week. So again, adding that kind of value to what's happening here. It's not just we do this thing and we leave it. It's always going to be scaffolded into something. It's always going to pull them or thread them through the content.
Yeah.
So it's not just, oh, now here's our obligatory response
Right.
Of the week, and now I can shut this all down and just move on to the next week.
It reduces that sense of irrelevancy, that sense of busy work, because it's
That's
part
the
of
hope,
a
right?
continuous project.
Absolutely. So yeah, and this is only 2 questions for each prompt, right? Or each discussion board. So again, not a ton of formatting or content that actually has to be written for each of these, but it's more so just the value added that we're trying to achieve.
I like it.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Nick. Thanks.
All right, moving on to the next one.
Okay. Oh, thank you. All right. And so then this next example, let's see. It uses the discussion board as sort of a way to compile a community data set or a class data set. And so the first part is compiling the data set, and then the next part would be using that data set to make observations, interpretations, and generate questions. So this example is about earthquakes, and the goal would be to understand the difference between magnitude and intensity of an earthquake, to understand how they're different, and then different factors that impact intensity. And so for this discussion, it would begin by having students first go out and choose an earthquake they're interested in knowing a little bit more about. And the assignment directs them to use the USGS Earthquake Catalog, which is a really cool data set that's worth knowing, and it's worth understanding how to navigate. And so then they would go to that location, choose their earthquake, and then come back and reply with some specific information about that earthquake. So quantitative data as well as qualitative data. And then also pulling in potentially an article that they can find online that also talks sort of qualitatively about the impact of the people and the structures, and also include a map. So we're kind of covering a lot of different aspects of the earthquake. But then also, they would take some of the quantitative data. So for example, in this case, it would be the magnitude and the intensity near the epicenter, and then add it to an embedded Google spreadsheet. And so in this case, as a student can type in information, it's interactive and dynamic. So if I put in some outlier data here, we can see the spreadsheet change, right? So students can put their data in, they can see how their earthquake looks relative to the data set that their classmates have been building. And so in a way, then they're able to visualize some aspect of the data set quantitatively, but also we have this repository of a lot of the qualitative data that goes along with it, the description. And so that would be the first part of the assignment, is in the discussion board. So then the next part would be taking it a step further, as I mentioned, using it for observations, interpretations. And that part could be done in a different discussion board. It could be done as its own assignment, or it could be actually threaded through within this discussion board. In this case, I've turned it into a second assignment. And so whatever the data set is, right, it could lend itself to a lot of different ways to discuss or to consider the data. But in this example, maybe students would be asked to discuss the relationship they're observing between magnitude and intensity near the epicenter, which there's a general relationship, but it's not one-to-one. But then further, they can interrogate the data set and start to look at, okay, what are some other things that impact the intensity? And referencing specific earthquakes from the data set, and they can pull from all the qualitative and additional quantitative information that their classmates have provided.
Yeah. Well, I love the technique of having this embedded spreadsheet in the discussion format. I hadn't seen that before you showed me that you could do that. And I love that the students are each just contributing one data point, right? But by crowdsourcing it like this, they are seeing that data set grow over the course of the week, and they're seeing it visualized there. And like immediately, I don't know anything about this content, but I can immediately recognize that there is some kind of correlation here And once I start understanding what that correlation is, then now I can go on and do that second assignment and really explain what's happening here. And I also like that in this example, your second activity is not a discussion. It's just an assignment.
Yeah.
Because one of the things we talked about last week was, is the discussion the appropriate tool for this activity? Sometimes it is, and sometimes it isn't.
Right.
This crowdsourcing part, absolutely, the discussion is a great format for that. But then the analysis of the data set is more of a solitary activity where you're just going in there, you're analyzing it, presenting your findings to the instructor, and you're done. So that makes perfect sense to just do that as an assignment rather than a discussion.
Yeah, I like that. And also, you know, some of this might help from some additional scaffolding. And so an instructor perhaps could come in here through the replies and start to make some comments to help scaffold that second part. So for example, you know, perhaps pointing out, gosh, there's several earthquakes here that have the same magnitude, but different intensities, and just helping students to start to see some nuances and outliers in the data to draw their attention, to start questioning, well, maybe why would that be? What are some things we can dig into?
Something I was just thinking about was what I really like about this discussion board is it doesn't hinge on, I guess, on a reply that might, I'm trying to figure out how to say this correctly. Like if Nick responds to this and Melanie doesn't, it's not going to affect Caleb because he's going to have enough data points to work from just over the course of however long the discussion board's open. And you as the instructor can also seed responses really easily. Maybe you put a couple really interesting ones in there just in case, or oh, I see they didn't get that quake in North Carolina, I'll throw them a ringer. Like you can put that stuff in there, like you were saying, pointing them out. But again, it's kind of like the goal of the discussion board isn't, you know, trying to create a reply or structure like that. Like to
Nick, I really like that earthquake that you picked.
Yeah,
It looks really strong.
My favorite earthquake too, Nick.
It is just, we are here to collaborate. But for the purpose of a later reflection, like the goal here isn't that I need to force an interaction. It's just get the data in this really cool way, and then we can move on and actually apply it later in a format that makes a lot more sense, like you're saying, aligned to a format.
Cool. Well, I really liked both of your examples. And I like that there's some diversity here, but also we kind of started converging on some similar best practices, because once you've identified what the drawbacks are in a discussion and then thought about how to address those, it really does help guide your discussion design a little bit.
Absolutely.
I think. Each of us had divergent questions. Nobody was going to come up with the same response. Always using a higher order of thinking just by the questions we were asking or by the way we were scaffolding it to ensure that, yes, we are challenging them in a way, right? We're not just asking for a multiple choice question or that kind of response in our discussion boards.
So to go deeper, use some higher order thinking.
Format is aligned. I don't think any of us were doing anything that would have made sense in a different format or been better in a different format. Made sense for having it in Canvas, get students all connected. Everything was authentic, right? We're asking them to do tasks or practice skills that make sense for the class and the outcomes of the class or future skill sets. Like yours is also, I mean, you're talking about data collection, you're talking about analyzing visualizations. Like there's a lot of really cool stuff that's getting at. And then finally, there is presence, but not forced presence. We're allowing for presence to be there.
The presence grows out of the actual activity and task. I see we have another thing in the chat.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Craig.
Thanks, Craig. Very creative approaches to discussions here. We appreciate that.
If any of those examples look interesting to you and you're curious about learning more about how we set it up, come and talk to us and we'll talk you through it and help you brainstorm your own creations.
And that's the fun stuff. I mean, I think all of us can make stuff for our own field, but I think it's so much more fun to have a crack at, something a little bit outside of our box. That's what makes it interesting. So,
well, we're already out of time. We timed that like perfectly. So well done.
That never happens.
Have a great holiday break, and we will see you again in winter quarter with a new newsletter and new tech talks.
Yeah. See you in the new year. Yeah. Jeez.
It's almost that time.
Thanks, Craig.
Bye all.
Have a good holiday.
You too.
There.
Thanks.